Hello there folks, welcome back to the Chap's Guide. My name is Ash and I am your host on this journey through men's style, self-development and personal grooming. Now as you know, I encourage people to ask questions, send them in via an email or even the comment section, where I will use my lived experience for what that is, to try and shed some light on something or maybe just give you an observation of mine. I'm not promising to answer your questions with the perfect solution, but what I do, if you shine a light on it sometimes and you get somebody else's perspective, it can be valuable for you. And that's exactly what I'm going to do today, because Akhilesh has written to me with this question. This is what he says. I have a question which I'm hoping you will provide your thoughts on. Here it goes. As a teetotaler, how do I best go about engaging in outings with work groups or otherwise without the awkwardness of being the only one or one of two who doesn't drink? Could you please write an article about the subject choosing for whatever reason to abstain from alcohol and how this may affect one's social life if your friends and business associates all indulge in alcohol? And it's a great question because Akhilesh is absolutely right. You know, it is, we live in a time where alcohol is absolutely the main social lubricant which we use when we gather together with other people. We tend to encounter people at events and so on. And whilst I think choosing not to drink is becoming more positive, you know, there are many more people who choose not to do so, there can be some common side effects to choosing not to drink and how you will be perceived maybe in your social orbit. So today, my plan is this. I'm going to give you some facts and figures about drinking around the world. Right? So I've got a couple of different countries here where their exposure to and tolerance for alcohol is different to one another. I'm going to give you some of the impacts that being a non-drinker can have on your life. And then I'm going to give you 3 actionable tips as to how you can abstain from alcohol, but without feeling any embarrassment for yourself or the people with whom you interact. So let's think about how much of a problem being a non-drinker in society actually is today. Now, in the United Kingdom, so I'm British, so in my country, the UK, a recent study identified to us that about 1 in 5 adults don't drink at all these days. So, you know, that's progressive, I think, because as a younger fellow growing up, I absolutely remember alcohol being the sort of epicenter for every family gathering, every social gathering, every work gathering. So to see that, 20%, and in fact, the statistics are between 17 and 22%, depending on where you live in the UK, adults don't drink. So it's quite a sizable, albeit still a minority, but a sizable minority of adults are choosing to abstain from alcohol in the UK. But if we go to Australia, other side of the world, there was a survey in 2022, 2023, 31% of Australians are identified to be drinking at risky levels. Heavy drinking being, you know, a common issue in Australia. So whilst the UK drinking amongst adults seems to be decreasing, Australia, you know, almost a third of adults will drink within a category which is considered risky, presumably for their health. So let's go to the United States of America, where excessive drinking isn't quite as prevalent. So a recent survey there shows that between 16 and 18% of US adults are seen to be excessive drinking or binge or heavy drinkers. So less than 20%. So yeah, it really does vary. And you know, it just goes to show that being a non-drinker is still putting you as a minority. So how is this likely to affect your life? As Akhilesh has said, you know, he's concerned that being the only non-drinker in the pile is going to set him out as, you know, an outlier amongst his associates. So what we are likely to find is that particularly when it comes to professional situations, if you go to a professional group of people, you know, there's an after-works gathering, I can guarantee you it's almost certainly going to be in a pub or a bar or somewhere where alcohol is offered. And that's where you start to feel a bit of an outlier, because your associates will naturally gather together around a beer or a glass of wine, and they will start to form a nucleus of people chatting. And if you're a non-drinker, yeah, you're going to feel like the only sober person in the room, and it's going to make you feel not part of that group of people. And that's going to have a psychological effect on you and the bonding process with your co-workers. So yeah, and people will ask the question, won't they? Why aren't you having a drink? You know, why aren't you joining in? Why aren't you one of the group? And by definition, what they're saying is, if you're, you know, why aren't you having a drink? Why aren't you part of the group? Is saying you're not part of the group. Effectively, that's the next sentence in that chain, isn't it? And there will be possible social effects as well, not just business effects professionally, but socially. Like I say, alcohol is oh so often the social lubricant in society today. It gets people talking. It'll get us chatting. And if you're the non-drinker in a group, you can expect to have a little bit of mild teasing, a bit of banter, you know, about why you don't drink. People will suspect that you don't have the ability to relax very effectively, because a lot of people in their minds, part of their stress signature of reducing their feeling of accumulated stress is to have a drink. And people will assume you're uptight. You know, you're not the sort of person who can relax easily. And yeah, it can have those impacts upon you. Not least, people will think, and I'm sorry to say this, I've been this guy, that you're a bit of a weirdo. Because I vividly remember, and I'm not proud of it, I was a very heavy drinker in an earlier phase of my life, particularly when I was in the armed forces. And if somebody joined our group, for instance, joined our department, our team, our section, and they were a non-drinker, they didn't come to the NAFI, which is the sort of club where enlisted service personnel would gather to have a few drinks. If they didn't come to the NAFI and they didn't sort of get involved, I'd think, God, what's wrong with this bloody weirdo? Non-drinker? What's all that about? And yeah, it would definitely spill over from socialising into the professional settings as well. So I'm going to give you some tips now, how you can tactfully and diplomatically navigate such situations where you're finding yourself not wanting to drink for whatever reason, all right, whether you're, I don't know, whether you're, it's just your desire not to drink alcohol, you don't like the taste of it, or it's a religious choice that you make, or whether you're in recovery, having had alcohol issues in the past and you want to go nowhere near it right now, or whether it's just, you've got some sort of fitness goals, or you want to keep the weight off, or whatever it is. Let's talk about how you can, ameliorate those worries about being the only non-drinker in the pile. Now, my number one tip is quite simply going to be the first one through the door at the bar. Get up to that bar, order confidently and first, basically, because if you get up to that bar and you say, I'm going to have, a Coke, you are setting the tone immediately. Those who pile in behind you, right, they're going to see that you're having a Coke. It actually diffuses a lot of the pressure. Because if you're fifth or sixth in through the door and everybody else has ordered a beer, there is going to be an expectation that you're going to have a beer. But if you're the first man through the door and you say, I'll have a Coke please, or I'll have a lemonade, or I'll have a soda water and lime, whatever your preferred non-alcoholic drink is, you've already set the tone. And when people are starting to order their rounds, then if they want to get into a drinking round of beer, you could say, look, deal me out, gents, I'm just having a Coke tonight and that's all I need. And actually, being that first person in, it demonstrates a lot of things. It's intentionality. You are intentional. I want a drink, I want my Coke. If you're the fifth guy in and people will say beer, it's very hard. Then you've got to say no. And if you say no, what, you don't want a beer? People look at you quizzically. They will expect an explanation. And you're already, and it becomes easier to say yes. Don't put yourself in that position. Be the first person through the door, get in there, order your drink. And then when you're chatting with the other folks, because you got to the bar first, more often than not, the nucleus of people will form around you. And you're holding a drink, all right? So you're part of that group of people. It's not like you're standing there twiddling your thumbs or your hands in your pockets, right? You are firmly in the position. That's my first bit of very practical advice, that one. Be the first guy through the door. My second bit of advice is build in your mind a bit of a script of what you are likely to say if somebody says to you, why aren't you drinking? Why aren't you enjoying yourself? Why aren't you letting your hair down and relaxing, be it in a social or a professional environment, all right? Have in your mind what you're going to say. And that way you don't have to sort of explain yourself. You don't have to backpedal and tell somebody, why it is that you don't want to drink. And it's quite simple. It can be something as simple along the lines of, no thank you, I'm not drinking alcohol at the moment. That's it. Don't then feel the need to fill the void and say, well, I'm trying to lose weight, or I've had issues with booze in the past and I'm steering clear of it. You're oversharing. Simple one-liners. And then if the other person then wants to step into that void and say, why the hell aren't you drinking? Have another follow-up response. Well, I don't like alcohol. I haven't drunk for years. Simple as that. And it can be any number of things. You can use an excuse. I'm driving later. But you haven't got your car with you now. You go home on the bus. Yes, but I've got to drive later tonight when I get home. Right? Always have a plausible excuse. And if somebody's pressing you, have a drink. I say, look, I don't want a beer. I'll have a soda or a Coke. Accept their offer of hospitality by offering you a drink, but insist no alcohol. I really do want what I want, and I won't be deviated. And I think it'll be very few people who would press you beyond that. Most people are courteous and respectful, and they'll be happy that you've said that. And if you do have to give a reason, keep it simple and brief. As I said, the less you say, the better when it comes, because people will try and draw more information from you. I'm driving later. I'm off alcohol at the moment. That's all you need to say. You don't have to divulge any more than that. And my third diplomatic way of sort of avoiding alcohol is to be the socializer yourself, to be that sort of prime mover. So you be the person who arranges the get-together after work. You be the person who arranges the barbecue or things like that. Because when you arrange it, you can place it somewhere, you can put it somewhere where there are viable options for people who don't want to drink. Now, if you go to a barbecue at John's house, right, and John is not somebody who even thinks that other people wouldn't want to drink, he's just going to have, slabs of beer there, and he's not going to have made provision for people who don't wish to drink, because in his mind it's inconceivable that another man wouldn't want to have a few beers. But if you make the arrangements, you can make sure you've got different types of soda, you've got different types of non-alcoholic options. So by being the prime mover yourself, it reframes you in the mind's eye of other people as somebody who's not really, joining in because they're not drinking, to somebody who's making a conscious choice. Right? I'm keeping a clear head because I'm entertaining people, and yeah, there's loads of options there. There's non-alcoholic beer, there's soda, there's everything you need. By making it more acceptable and viable, by being the host yourself, there won't be any questions or concerns that you're not part of the team. And I think that works very well. And even if it's, if you're meeting somebody after work, you don't have to do it in a bar. You can do it in a coffee shop so that you can enjoy a coffee rather than a beer. You see what I mean? It's about reframing what is the normal when it comes to, normal situations where alcohol come into people's lives. And I think one of the things we can do, we can make light-hearted, jokes about it when we encounter, if you are a drinker yourself, don't be that person who asks that question. Why aren't you drinking? If somebody says to you, I don't want to drink tonight, don't be, and I was terrible for this when I was younger. I assumed if you didn't drink, there was something wrong with you. I would press somebody to, go on, have a drink, go on, relax. I thought I was doing somebody a favor by cajoling them into having a drink, but actually I was breaking down their self-discipline by doing so. So from this point on, be thoughtful. If somebody says, I don't want to drink, don't say, oh, go on. Just say, oh, I understand. And know the difference when people say things to you as well. If somebody says, I'm off drink at the moment, that's fine. If somebody says, I'm sober at the moment, remember, somebody who says, I'm sober generally means that they've had problems with alcohol and they are deliberately avoiding alcohol. So if you keep pressing somebody who says, I'm sober at the moment, you know, what you're trying to do is to get somebody who's had issues to break down their resolve, which is keeping them, you know, well and in a good place. So be conscious about what people say to you when you're pushing alcohol on them. And, you know, never be that person who insists they have a drink. I insist. You will not come to my party unless you have a glass of champagne. Remember, there are many people out there for whom champagne is a nemesis and, you know, they don't want it, despite what you might think. So there we go. I hope that was of some assistance to Achilles, and it gives you some ideas. If you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. Press subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this. And don't forget, you can join me on the journey by becoming one of my patrons. In the description box below this video, there's a link to my Patreon pages. You can join my Patreon group without actually paying for it, by the way. I do free video releases every week for all of my patrons. Of course, if you pay, you get the good stuff. But come and join me. I'd be delighted to have you on my journey to Chap Nirvana. So until the next time we meet, take care. And I will see you soon.